high tariffs always lead to smuggling. Another one thing is that our government policies are completely devoid of thinking about the consumer welfare. When you let the industry or the business, like behind the walls, the one critical problem is that they become inefficient. So I think this political, or you can say the elite capture has actually led to this policy distortion in the policy making. But auto industry is a big outlier, as you know, in our tariff structure. And I think that was the time when many donor agencies and, like the rest of the world and many studies just demonstrated that we have the highest tariff structure in the region and to some extent in the world. So this is how you are distorting not only your industrial development, you are distorting your markets, you are distorting the prices.
Welcome everyone to yet another episode of All Things Money. Today we've got Dr. Robina Ather Ahmed, who is the former chairperson of the National Tariff Commission. And basically she's going to talk to us about what tariffs are, what's happening in Pakistan on the tariff front, and where will tariffs be over the next few years. Thank you, Dr. Robina, for your time. Really appreciate the same.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Saiba, what's really happening in tariffs? Can you just guide us through the journey of what tariffs had been in Pakistan, where we are right now, and where would we would be in future? And more importantly, starting with what really are tariffs?
What really are tariffs? Okay. So, tariff in simple words is you can say a duty imposed on whatever you are importing or exporting. So it's a source of revenue for government. It's to regulate the trade flows. It's to regulate the industrial development. So tariff is actually used in various policies in different ways. So the Pakistan experience, actually, if you remember, that in 70s, all around the world, there was a tendency for import substitution industrial development. Import substitution means that you put high tariffs on import so that imports are prohibited and let your domestic industry reap the benefit of it in terms of, like no imports and giving them a breathing space to increase their competitiveness and grow. So 70s was an era of import substitution everywhere in the world. In 80s and 90s, the world realized, many economies realized that this is not a like a conducive policy for industrial development because protection has a negative effect on efficiency. And the revenues coming from trade taxes are actually very volatile. So they are not a reliable source of revenues also. And in order to regulate, you have other instruments you should use rather than the tariff. So there came a wave of tariff, rationalization. And then came the important theories or, like practices of export-led growth. And we all are familiar with the Southeast Asia, which just demonstrated that lowering the tariffs, letting the industry become efficient, and that would actually leads to export. So that we went to that phase. But unfortunately, where the world moved to export-led growth, we continued with the import substitution. And there was political reasons for that. in 90s, again, under the influence of or under the compulsion of IMF, we started with a tariff rationalization. But the history is that two steps forward, one step forward, two step backward. So we went through all that. In mid-20s, we had a very, like revolutionary trade liberalization, where the tariffs were somewhere like in 150, and they got back to 30s and 20%. Again, like after the 2008 financial crisis, we again went into import substitution mode or increasing the tariff. And at that point, another instruments came into being, like regulatory duty and additional customs duty. And so the structure was made more complicated at that time. And that continued till, we can say, in the late 20s. It was the first tariff policy was introduced in 2019. And I think that was the time when many donor agencies and, like the rest of the world and many studies just demonstrated that we have the highest tariff structure in the region and to some extent in the world. So at that time, it was realized that the main reason, or probably one of the reasons for our lack of, growth in exports is this tariff, the high tariffs, because the high tariffs increase the cost of manufacturing and it makes you uncompetitive. And at the same time, it creates an export bias, which means that the producer is more comfortable in selling in the domestic market rather than going into export or international market. So these were the few realizations which led the government to go for the tariff policy. So the first national tariff policy was introduced at that time. The two first years went very well. We were able to reduce tariff on many 2,500 tariff lives to zero, and then ACD and RD. But in the third year, again, that, like foreign exchange crisis came, and you remember that there was a huge dollar crisis and all that, the things, and the government got panic and they reversed the whole process. So again, in 2025, this realization came again, and at that point, the economy was in better situation. So the second phase of the tariff policy came in. The difference between the two is that the first was mainly to guide, like to set the guidelines that this would be the way that we will reduce the tariff. The second tariff policy very clearly set the targets, that this would be the simple average tariff by the end of the 5 years. This would reduce, ACD would be eliminated, RD would be eliminated, CD would be this average. There would be no fifth schedule, there would be no concessional tariffs. So these are the different targets that the tariff policy set. So sorry, I'm going into too much detail, but that's I think is the background where we are now.
No, I think this is important. The background is really important. So just to provide, let's say, to get an idea, why do we have multiple layers of tariffs? You've got the RD, you've got the ACD, you've got the CD. Why did we have those, and what really is required? And is that really something that happens in other jurisdictions as well? And what really needs to be done to just completely eliminate all of these?
Okay, so I think, as I said, there is a like historical development, and as I said, the RD started in after 2008. Now, the reason at that point was to regulate the import, because we have the current foreign exchange crisis, and we didn't want import bill to rise. So the initial, the intention was not so bad to regulate the trade at that point, and that was needed. But what happened in our circumstances is that once some levy is, levied, we don't put any sunset clause for it, and we don't actually go that the need is no more, and we should, like get it off. So the same happened with RD. Then in somewhere in 2000, I think, I don't remember exactly, but somewhere in 2000, this concept of ACD. This concept of ACD came when under the IMF program, we had to give certain revenue targets. And FBR at that point thought that increasing, like custom duty, putting 1% custom duty would give them this much of revenue. So that's how came the ACD concept. There was no ACD or RD concept earlier. There was only one duty that was called the custom duty. So that's how, but once you place these kind of distortions, then there are many interests which come in. And we know that the kind of elite capture we have in policy making in Pakistan. So when this happened, the FBR objective was to raise revenue, but the businesses then find it a very convenient way of getting protection. So they started coming to FBR, and for one reason or another, to increase the RD. FBR, like they both have the same, they have the, incentive. So
alignment, yeah.
Yeah, so the FBR was getting revenue, they were getting protection, so this continued. So that's how these layers and layers of duties came into being. And I think other than the custom duties, if you look at our structure, there is sales tax, there is excise duty, there is withholding tax, income tax. So, and if you look at the income tax and sales tax rate, as we are reducing the custom duty rates, eliminating RD and ACD, sales tax and withholding tax rates are increasing. So I think there is a political economy behind it. There are some kind of, if you look at the income tax structure, I think more than 70% of their revenue is coming through withholding taxes. So, and they find it a very easy and convenient way to collect taxes, like the custom used to be. So these are, I think, are the factors, some hard realities, which are very difficult to address. But at least government was successful enough to implement the tariff policy. And right now, the tariff policy is raising concern and is raising voice for other import-related taxes, because other taxes act as a tariff. The businesses or the importer has to pay an upfront cost for it. Sales tax refund, as we know, there is a huge backup, and it takes years to get that refund. Similarly with the income tax refunds. So I think that's how this all developed, and this was one of the major reasons that in tariff policy very strictly targets were set, that ACD would be eliminated, RD would be eliminated. And in the last 2 years, the 2 years of this policy, this has been done. As you have seen, ACD has been drastically reduced. RDs are reduced, and by the end of the 5th year, there will be no RD or ACD. There will be only one duty, CD. So, yeah. So these are I think, some of the hard facts.
Yeah, I think this is interesting. So, I mean, for example, I'm just going to really focus on one product here, a laptop. I was looking at laptop, and there are different prices for a laptop in the market. So if you want to buy it formally as a company, the rate is probably like 35 to 40% higher. And that is because there is GST in it, there is some withholding tax in it, there are some import duties in it, so on and so forth. And yeah, as you actually pointed out, that the import tax isn't a lot, but because of the withholding tax and the GST,
Yeah.
suddenly that increases. So the total proportion has
Mm.
largely moved from, let's say, trade-related tariffs to something completely else, more domestic in nature.
Yeah.
So that increases the cost significantly. And if something, a typical, let's say, machine is available for $1,000 or 280,000, the same would
Mm.
eventually cost you about 350,000. And there is a
Mm.
lot of arbitrariness in that as well, where, I once got a tablet imported and I had to pay the same price. The quantum of taxes I had to pay was
Mm.
as much as the actual price of the product.
More,
So
even more
that
than that. Yeah.
even more than that. So that
Yeah.
just leads to a lot of, I would say, smuggling, a lot of informal
Yes.
imports.
Yeah.
What really needs to be done on that front? Because I'm sure there must be a way where there is some kind of rationalization where one would just simply not be incentivized to informally import something and just let free flow of goods be made possible.
Yeah. So I said that this is a really, like it's not as simple as we think, but there are many characters involved in it. But the one fact remains that high tariffs always lead to smuggling. And I think this is one of the key areas where we are working through the tariff policy. And we have seen the effects, like in case of tires, um, almost everything was coming through smuggling. But the moment we reduced the tariff, they started coming from legal channel. So same as with right now with electronics and mobile phones, since the tariffs are very high, tariffs and other duties are very high, we see this, there is a whole, can say the whole market or big market for it, where the sellers are not registered or sellers are not paying income tax. So whenever you go to them, they, as you said, the non-tax paid mobile phone or your laptop would be cheaper. Um, so so when you look at this thing, so why I said it's complicated, because we have, as I said, we have gone to this export-led growth, but we are still, the policymakers, unfortunately, are still in that mindset of import substitution. So if you look at the government's departments, which are actually like the Ministry of Industries, you would find people there who still believe that we should manufacture, that made in Pakistan. We should manufacture laptops. We should do, like batteries. We should do mobile phones. We should manufacture everything. And when we say that we should manufacture everything, then they ask for these protection walls. So it's very hard right now. What I have through my this last 20 years experience seen in government, that there are actually very few people who actually believe in liberalization. There are still policymakers at the head who believe in import substitution and who believes in protection. So this is how you are distorting not only your industrial development, you are distorting your markets, you are distorting the prices. So definitely this has to be corrected. And as I said, the various like conflicting interests of various departments. Industry want protection, FPR want revenue, commerce want liberalization, and so these are very different incentives, or I can say the different objectives of the policies. There was a one, like this realization at the government level when we were doing this policy, that there should be some coherence between the industrial, at least between the industrial policy, commerce policy, trade policies, and so different economic policies, at least. Another one thing is that our government policies are completely devoid of thinking about the consumer welfare. nobody ever gave a thought to it. And I think this is a very, very important thing, that policies are made without keeping a consumer in the view. We have manufacturers because they have a strong lobby, they have a big voice. Consumers are not, like organized, so they are not heard anywhere. So this is, I think, the whole structure we are working with, and gradually trying to move to some situation where all these things are in place.
So, I mean, I'm just ironically, I'm just talking to a colleague of mine. He just got back from the US earlier in the day, and the custom stopped him, and he had to pay duty on something. And when I figured what it was basically cosmetics for his wife.
Yeah.
So now, essentially, what's happening is personal goods are also being, you have to pay a certain duty on bringing in that as well. I don't know how
Mm.
that works out, but that clearly just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Because even if it's for personal use, and it's not definitely, if you're trading, obviously it's like in bulk and such, that's a separate story altogether. But basically, you're at risk for anything and everything at this point, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Mm. No, no, no. I think this is sometimes it's the policy which makes such omissions, but in this case, this is definitely the custom people. There is no duty on personal use items. I think limited, like there would be few lipsticks or something like that, but there shouldn't be, there is legally, there is no tariff on it, and no custom duty. But as we know,
So
things there. So this must be some, like the other
exactly,
other
well,
thing. Yeah.
something arbitrary. So
Yeah.
again, more a question on being arbitrary. Then who decides? Or is there a law or some kind of framework that suggests that this much of quantity of something can be deemed as personal, and anything over and above that can be deemed as
No,
something
no,
that's tradable?
there is. I think customs has very clearly defined that what is a, like in terms of import, what is a commercial import, what is a personal import. Sometimes, like on some things, like even if you are using it for a personal, there is a little bit of customs duty on it, like on textiles or maybe something else. So things are defined. It's not that it's so arbitrary, but since the customer doesn't know about it, so the custom people take advantage of that.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. I think what you mentioned about import substitution and export promotion, it's from my experience, people use these two terms interchangeably. And
Yeah,
this is, I think, where the trouble begins. So,
yeah.
for the people who are watching this, just for the sake of education, how would you differentiate between what really is import substitution and what is export promotion, and why they're not the same thing, and why we cannot use them interchangeably?
Okay. Yeah, you're absolutely right. When we started the first tariff policy, and I tried to explain in one of the meetings that this is we've been going through import substitution, and like the majority of the response from the ministers and all the people cabinet sitting there was, no, why can't we have both? And we've been having both. Yes, we are promoting exports, and yes, we have to do made in Pakistan. And it was hard for me to explain to them that you can't have both, because they are, like contradictory policies, and they have very different objectives. So in a simple way, when we say that import substitution, so what we are trying to say is that we have an industry which is not competitive. In order to give them this competitive edge, we put, as I said, the tariff walls, so that import is prohibited, and they give a market, and they get a market to produce at a higher cost, but like sell in the market by certain proportion of prices higher than the international market. And if they continue for this for a pretty long time, let's say 10 years, they in fact would, when their fixed costs are covered, they would become competitive, and then they would be able to export at the international prices also. But experience from the world shows that this doesn't happen. When you let the industry or the business, like behind the walls, the one critical problem is that they become inefficient because they have certain level of profits. They are happy with it, that they are getting profits because they are selling in the domestic market at the higher prices. They get profits. They don't go for scale, and they, inefficiency doesn't matter to them because they are getting their profits. And so they don't get scale, they don't get efficient. So in the longer period, the overall your industrial structure becomes inefficient. There is low productivity. So these are the substitution. Export-led growth actually is based on the principle. One thing is very core to it is that imports are for exports. So one of the argument in import substitution is that our balance of payment doesn't allow to import much. So that's why we have to produce everything for ourselves. Export-led growth is based on the principle that if import is for export, then you must import, because import brings technology, import brings, like some products, some materials which you don't have. So this is the basic principle. And then there is the export-led growth actually based on the principle that there is no anti-export bias. Anti-export bias is very misconceived. Anti-export bias means that when you put tariff on your output product, which I said earlier in case of import substitution, lucrative for the seller than the world market. So he has or she has an incentive to sell in the local market. For instance, if the international price is 100 rupees and you put 20% tariff on it, the local manufacturer can set the price at, let's say, if not 120, then maybe 119, whereas the international price is 100. So why would he like to export? And how could he export when he's selling at 119 or 120 in the local market? So this is actually the difference between import substitution. So that's how you encourage the industry to become efficient, to import technology, to upgrade technology, to import the critical raw materials or intermediates which are not available in your economy, which are not produced in your economy. And if they are produced, they are at a higher cost. So if you import them in lower cost, it actually reduces their cost of production. So that's how they become competitive, and that's become able to export.
All right, this makes sense. So you said earlier that there's always a conflict between tariff and industrial policy. I'm sure there are examples out there where the tariff and industrial policy are largely aligned globally. What do you think needs to be done here for that to actually happen?
Yeah, I think here, as I explained earlier, the background or the historical development. So as I said, over the time, we have let the businesses or industry to influence the policy making one way or another. They have the big manufacturers. They have a big voice. They have connection. They have access to the government. They have even access to the prime minister. If anything happens, they directly go to the prime minister and tell them that, this tariff is not right for us, and we need this and we need that. So I think this political, or you can say the elite capture has actually led to this policy distortion in the policy making. So you asked that what could be done about it. This is exactly what is done in this tariff policy. That we have set the targets. We have, like very clearly said that there would be this much of tariff, and in the 5 years, this is how it would reduce. Now, I tell you a very interesting example of where, like the elite capture is auto industry. I think the way we implemented the tariff policy earlier, there was some resistance from the industry, but within like year or two, there is an acceptance that this is what we need, and all the small, big, medium industries are in favor of that. We should have tariff rationalization, and this would actually improve health of the industry. But auto industry is a big outlier, as you know, in our tariff structure. And this is, like happening for the last many, many years. There are many, like researchers, there are many, many reports, anything, that this industry has zero contribution in terms of employment, in terms of any. But the industry is so vocal and so adamant that no, this is the industry which is crucial for the economy. We are contributing this and this. And they are the biggest opponent of tariff rationalization. And right now, if you know that there was supposed to be tariff auto policy announced with the budget, but so far there are still discussions going on, and it's not filing because the manufacturers have a big like say in it. But the tariff policy is very clear on it, and we told them that this is how the tariffs on auto would go down, like in many other industries. So I think this is the only way, and if the government stick to what it has in its policy, I think world experience shows this is the only way to do it.
I think one word that we always use for that is perpetual infant. So it was an infant industry maybe 40 years back or 50, I don't even know
Yeah,
at
it's
this
still
point.
infant. Yeah,
And they are still in their infancy and just not
yeah,
able to grow up. And I just feel over the years with more imports opening and new brands, competition heating up, clearly the consumer has benefited in terms of lower prices and more variety over the last few years. But
yes,
somehow there is an effort to actually move away from whatever was happening in the world, whatever new technological developments are taking place, and just stick with whatever was being sold by I would just say it here, the Japanese and the Korean automakers for the
yeah,
longest time with the
yeah,
technology. I mean, the same car they cannot sell in any other part of the world because of certain safety
exactly.
requirements, but they would happily sell it and without any consequence or repercussions
Yes,
whatsoever. So one just hopes that finally this changes going forward. What
yeah.
other industry do you feel has been as protected as the textile industry here?
I think another protected industry is probably iron and steel. If you look at the iron and steel sector, there are huge tariffs there still. And that is again the same story. We protected them, and we continue protecting them for a long period now. So one of the argument by them is that it's a capital intensive industry, so technology is expensive, so they need protection for a particular period. But when that period goes, they again come. Then like here, the protected industry is not just the output industry, the products, but mainly the intermediate products. Like iron and steel is an intermediate product. So similarly with the soda ash, PFY, the synthetic fiber industry. So these are all you can say in an upstream. And so the problem is that when we raise tariff or keep them protected, the downstream industry suffers. Like the textile industry is, like heavily suffering because of the heavy soda ash protection is leading to other downstream like glass manufacturing and all. So they are suffering because of that. So this is actually the problem with our industry, that we are mainly the major industries producing intermediates, and we are protecting them there. So that's why our light engineering is not developing. That's why our other downstream allied industries are not developed. So this is the major cost we are paying for protection.
So have we done, I'm sure there are done, but in pockets, any value chain analysis of what really is the core problem in each industry? For example, as you said, glass, maybe soda ash can be a critical component, or in iron steel, maybe just a certain imports on import of certain steel can be a critical issue. Has the government done, or any other entity has done, a comprehensive value chain assessment of where it really lies a problem for different industries?
Yeah. We did. I think when I was in the National Tariff Commission, we did the value chain, and we did it for iron and steel. We did it for textile. We did it for some chemicals, plastics. Yeah, there is, and I think all this tariff rationalization policy came through this, that we realized that where the problem is. No, right now there is a different way we are using in tariff rationalization. One is the national tariff policy, which has set different targets. They are the overall tariffs. Like I said, that they are the slabs. We're reducing the slabs. We are reducing the ACDs, RDs, irrespective of which sector it is. But at the same time, there is another process going on where we are looking at the whole value chain and trying to see where the problem is and tackle the tariff there. So there are two different, not different, but reinforcing streams going on. One is across the board and other is industry-based. So this is how the tariff rationalization is going on.
Okay, perfect. So we're just almost at the end of our time slot. Just one last thing, Dr. Robina. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, whatever has been proposed, a 5-year plan till the reduction of, I don't know if it's 5 year or 7 year, the reduction of tariffs and the elimination of the spurious or duplicative duty structure eventually works out. What happens then? How will exports really take off? Will it be immediate? Will it be with a lag? What is the experience globally? What do you think really happens in the case of Pakistan? Will it be more investment in export or industry? Just what would a stage-wise mapping of this look like?
Okay. So I think it's when we were formulating the policy, these were the questions raised by relevant questions, rightly raised. And at that point, unfortunately, we had a very partial equilibrium, simple model, and we tried to work out that how the imports and exports would grow under this scenario. But then we requested the World Bank. They had this CGE model, 142 countries based, very, very comprehensive GTAC model. So we requested them to give do some analysis for us. So on that analysis, we found that, exports would grow by roughly by 14% in that period. Imports would also grow, but imports would grow at a slower rate than the exports. GDP would grow by this much, employment would grow by this much. So we had a rough, picture in front of us if we are going to introduce this policy, what the impacts would be. overall economy was. But it's really very hard to like day to day see what the impacts are, and especially on exports. We all understand that there is always a lag, and international experience also shows us that there is a lag. It's not possible that one moment you reduce the tariff, the cost is reduced the next month, or even in 6 or 1 year, the export would grow. So we are giving ourselves a time, and I think within the policy, it is decided that there will be a mid-year review, so most probably next year, which will be the 3rd year, and we will see how it is going. There is also, export is not just the one criteria there. We would also like, within the policy, we have built in that there would be a review if any industry is negatively impacted because of this tariff rationalization. We will also see where the competitiveness have improved. We will also see where the cost has gone down. Since this is only 1 year that we have, so it was too early to do any analysis of that. But we have, the government has initiated a perception survey. So the perception survey is mainly, we are going to the industry, the businesses, small, medium, and large, and asking them very simple questions that, what do you think of tariff rationalization? This is mainly from exporters. And we are just asking them, we know that there would be no impact in 1 year, but do you think that there would be an impact? And I think this would be a very helpful for us to see, because normally in the initial year, this is the perception that matters, because there would be no actual increase in exports or anything. It's the perception, it's the business confidence that actually matters. And if we are able to get that, I think that would be a big support for the policy to implement further. So this is the survey is almost, the field work is almost complete. And I think in the next 2-3 months, we will be able to get the report. So this is, I think, the one way we are actually all at our level, small exercises we are doing. Like we identified few products, and we have seen in the export data that we have reduced tariff on their imports, and we could clearly see increase in their exports. So I think this was because we just a few days ago we analyzed that in the last 5 years, when we reduced tariff in the first policy, so what happened to the products? So there are a number of products where the export has gone up. And it's not just for 1 year or 2 years, it's consistently going up. So it means that one shock doesn't mean that one shock is a shock and it has an effect, one-time effect. It actually carries on. And we have seen many products where they are consistently increasing their export. So this is very, like assuring that this is a right policy, and hopefully we get the positive results and expected results.
I think this is wonderful news. What products would these be? Just a few names. I would just love to actually look at the data.
Small products. These are small products because we know that since 70-80% is textile, so it's mainly textile. So we try to find out, like a few products which are not textile. So simply, I think jute is the one example. We reduced tariff on jute, and jute products are now, there was no export and it has gone up. Similarly, I think if you look at the iron and steel, we this year, last year, we reduced tariff on high rolled coil house copper, and we see the galvanized and iron, its export has increased many folds. We decreased tariff on this feed for poultry and animal and shrimp, and we have seen a huge rise. So it's very small, but at least in terms of diversification of export, this is a very positive sign. So, and then there were a few textile items also. And so there are a number I don't exactly remember now, but these are the few items. I'm not saying that there was a huge, like these were the exports in millions and billions, but these were small
But
number of.
there is an uptick. As long as there's an
There
uptick,
is
you're
an
at least
uptake.
moving
Yeah.
in the
And
right
as I
direction.
said, moving in the right direction for a consistently for many years now.
And then you can eventually just scale up as long as you're directionally
Yeah.
correct.
So that's what expected, that the scale will build up. And as we move from more, and I think so far we haven't reduced tariff much on the output products. So what we are expecting is that once this anti-export bias is addressed, there would be more incentive for export.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Robina, for your time. Really,
Thank
really
you.
appreciate the
Thank you
same.
for
Thank you
having
for a
me.
wonderful
Thank you.
conversation. Thank
Thank you.
you. All right, everyone. This is it for another episode, All Things Money. Until next time. Thank you.